Hello and welcome to the program. My name is Michael Finney. Today I am joined by author J. Kenton Pierce. Would you like to say hello, sir?
Hi. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
Really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. It's great to have you on and learn about you. Let's start there. Let's talk about who you are, where you're from, what you do, your interests, anything important about your background that people should know or maybe that they don't know, or anything interesting or compelling about how you got here.
Well, I wouldn't say anything terribly compelling. I've done that typical sci-fi fantasy author's path where you work a dozen different jobs totally unrelated. Gulf War veteran, but I was more the Radar O'Reilly sort with a clipboard than some tactical tool operator. Let's see. Worked lots of retail. I've worked in biotech, molecular biology. I was a lab technician playing around with DNA, basically following a cookbook and keeping your hands clean. you know, um, got laid off from that and ended up doing clerical work, which is kind of scary because working for the Commonwealth, running the mail machine, I got paid more than I did to assemble and disassemble DNA, custom made to order. That's kind of disturbing. I've been a gamer for ages. Got into MMOs as people moved away and all the gaming groups broke down. And realized I don't have to buy Doritos and Mountain Dew for these guys when I'm playing online. And that got into more storytelling, making more and more characters. Eventually, I figured out that what I liked doing was creating characters in their backgrounds more than actually playing. City of Heroes, I must have had 6 pages of all characters. So that eventually led to me trying to figure out how to tell stories.
Very nice. And let's talk a little bit more about your story, as we did before we started recording. So let's talk about that accent. Let's hear about it. Where does that come from?
I grew up speaking Tennessee hillbilly here in Western PA, but my grandparents were from Tennessee. And of course, they got picked on for that, talking like a hillbilly. That wasn't popular. But I was also halfway between Pittsburgh and Youngstown, Cleveland. So it's the Yunzer and the flat Ohio non-accent.
It's a very unique accent over there.
I didn't even realize I had, but I've got this kind of a non-accent, but depending on who I'm talking to, I lean more into that without realizing it.
It's a funny thing to basically assess character or the underpinnings, of what becomes a spirit. And I think what you were talking about in terms of designing characters, you have to sort of select these little totems, right? And then build it up around that. And that, that might be an accent, that might be physical traits, that could be all kinds of different stuff.
Well, with Shy, I wanted something that fit for a character on a frontier in essentially a post-apocalyptic world where people have been semi-isolated. There's province, plus there's her age. She firmly believes that there's no point in having a language if you can't hold it down and tickle it until it pees. And that does actually kind of reflect my view on things. There's a place for proper grammar and diction, but not all the time. I mean, when I first started watching Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, an episode or two in, I'm paying attention to the dialect and the Whedonisms. And I've said, wow, finally, someone who speaks English. Because the stuff he did with dialogue works more with how my head worked than, what was considered normal or cool amongst the kids in my day and age. So that probably influenced Shy. That and Firefly. The other characters, they just kind of pick things up. Sometimes I'll try to lean in on a different pattern of speech, dialect to differentiate another character's dialogue. But most of the time, they just develop themselves. I just follow them around and take notes at this point.
Interesting. Who were some of your influences growing up? I assume you read back in the day, or
Oh, heaps. That is, if I'd had my way, that's all I would have done. Andre Norton, her Solar Queen free trader books. Apprentice Quartermaster Dane Thorson. I absolutely loved his books. Brian Daly's Han Solo books, of course, and early Heinlein, particularly as juveniles. I probably had a crush on Podkane of Mars when I was a kid. Loved Have Spacesuit Will Travel. And another one who is sadly unrecognized is James A. Schmitz. He was an author in the 50s. He wrote some stuff that is absolutely my favorites. The Witches of Karis. And that was just a great fun read. Great voice, great universe, great world building, and characters I wanted to hang out. So those were my big influences in reading as a kid. As I got into writing, I could say that I definitely there's a lot of Jim Butcher and Lois McMaster Bujold there, because they wrote characters I wanted to hang out with and told stories the way I like to have them be told, the way I like to hear them. So I'm sure that's affected my work. And I would say, too, I'm sure some Larry Correa once I got hooked on MHI.
When did you start writing?
Oh, a little over 10 years ago. I had a challenge, a forum challenge on my Star Trek Online fleet. They were doing some RP stuff in the forums, and one of the guys said, "Hey, take that 300-letter character bio and fill it out to a few hundred words." And about 10,000 words later, I realized that, hey, I really like storytelling. And then I proceeded to start trying to write some Star Trek fanfic based on my TOS characters. But then I learned that the publisher who did all the Star Trek books was no longer accepting unsolicited manuscripts or unagented manuscripts. So I pouted for 6 months or a year, kept gaming, and then the characters kind of wouldn't leave me alone. I filed out the serial numbers and gave them their own universe. Shy and Zeddy, the two of the main characters in Shy's books, started out a maladjusted Andorian red shirt with angry short girl energy, and an augment, one of Khan's breed, who had been raised by Vulcans. So that's how I got started on the writing. What really got me serious about it was when I read Jim Butcher's live journal on genre writing, and it was just he just did some basic. This is what you do. This is the trouble sparks. This is what you do when you hit the big swampy middle. And that peek under the hood just opened up a whole world for me. And I just kept plugging along. My first sale was a Shy story to Abyss and Apex magazine in 2016. And then there was a dry spell. I was bouncing off all of the major pro markets, usually getting the form letters once in a while. Well, if you change the story this way to make it an entirely different story, we'd be interested. Which was, it was that type of feedback's a pearl of great price. At least it's more a matter of taste and what they look for. And I had one rejection that I can't help but read it in the Queen of England's voice. "This story does not meet the literary voice that we strive for in Snoofy Froofy Foofy magazine." So I took that rejection with a badge of pride. But I started getting sales to, I started submitting to Eric Flint's Grantville Gazette for the Baines Universe Annex section. That's where Eric Flint had kept open a couple slots in each episode, each issue, for classic sci-fi fantasy, just as a labor of love to the genre. And I had a couple of sales for them. Eric Flint paid my rent a couple of times. Then when he passed away, another dry spell, I just kept writing because I couldn't stop writing and was kind of despairing, figuring I'm going to have to self-publish, and I just don't have the mental bandwidth to learn all the things I need to learn to do that right. But then I stumbled across Raconteur Press through Writer's Dojo and the North Texas Troublemakers. I started submitting, and I had a higher than average success rate with them. I think I've got 12 or 13 short stories in their anthologies now over the last couple of years.
Wow. Notable. That's a lot.
It makes every novel a little easier because I am easily distracted. I was that kid who never finished a project. Brilliant ideas. I was going to do amazing things with this, whatever this endeavor or hobby was, and then I'd get bored because, oh, this is real work. Never mind.
It always is.
So when I started writing, I made a rule that I would keep everything in the same setting. So I don't go herring off to write something unrelated in a different genre, a different world. And that artificial discipline, I guess, has helped me because everything being in the same story universe, I get a historical reference will spin up and demand its own short story. A simple historical quotation that somebody mentions builds up into a story. And all these prequel short stories and one-offs give me an expanded foundation to work with. So it's my universe is getting deeper and broader all the time, which actually, yeah, I've got to work to keep things consistent. But overall, it's I find it easier to work since I've got this framework already established, a history already established.
How do you track all of that?
Badly. I've got one database. I've got a spreadsheet page that has each story and what year it took place.
Okay.
So I've got like a 2,000 year timeline. I have been using Campfire for whiteboarding my stories as I assemble a novel. I put down the scenes that have come to mind.
What is Campfire?
It is a organizational program. I think it was mainly done for originally for gamers, but also for writers. It's got a bunch of different functions. You've got your whiteboards and timelines. You can also create your story Bible there, character sketches, an encyclopedia. They've got a section where you can build your magic or your sci-fi tech base and document everything if you're organized. I'm not organized, so I'm kind of haphazard with it. Beyond a list of different factions and which character belongs to which faction and who has met who yet. Because that kind of becomes an issue.
Oh, Campfire is like creative writing. I was just looking it up.
Campfire, Campfire Pro. It's a very handy program.
Very cool.
There is another one that I need to learn. I got it, but I need to learn to use it, and then I need to buy an indentured servant who can enter all the data in and transfer everything over. It's every time I sit down.
I always find it interesting to see what technology writers are utilizing or putting into place. But I feel like, so to me, kind of like what I've been hearing over the course of the conversation is that, you know, you're into gaming, the storytelling, the world building components of that, they kind of come forward into when you begin writing. Have you looked at any of the, you know, I guess they talk like, I forget the phrase for it specifically now, but basically, like RPGs and books, literary RPG, lit RPG. That's the phrase I was looking for.
I haven't read any of them. I've got some friends that write it, and I've got some friends that are really into it. but I really haven't dug into it and read any of them. For one thing, most are fantasy.
Sure.
And I kind of burned out on fantasy a while back. I used to read sci-fi and fantasy avidly, and I didn't care which. And at some point, I hit a wall on fantasy where everything was getting more and more grimdark.
Mm.
And a lot of stuff I plowed through when I should have just said nope and tossed it aside, put it in the donation bin. And I haven't been able to get down with the fantasy as the way I used to. Sci-fi I still devour, though. I just, between work and life and my own writing, don't have a lot of time for it.
Mm. Yeah, it does get difficult to balance that kind of stuff out. I find, throughout the day, I'm fairly productive, regardless of the time. But then in the evening, what I like to do is I like to go for a walk and I'll listen to audiobooks. That has been a real benefit for me because it's very difficult for me to carve out the dedicated time to read a physical book.
Yeah, I live on audiobooks. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I had some complications from LASIK.
Uh-oh.
So my eye time is limited. By the end of the day, 7, 8 at night, I actually have trouble focusing. So I fiend on the audiobooks. Plus, when I'm driving or walking or doing other things, I can enjoy those where I get, if I got caught with a paper book, waiting between phone calls or something at work, then I'd be in trouble. Audiobook, I just tap my earpiece. Yeah, I am I am a fiend for audiobooks.
I have intensely swapped over to audio from physical books. I was never into digitally reading. I find no joy in reading on my phone or on an iPad. Or I did a couple of books on tablets about 15 years ago, and it was okay. It was just because it was available. It was like a very early Kindle. I don't want to read off of a phone or a computer unless it's like an article or something kind of brief. I'm happy to read a physical book. Like the folks in our scene, I buy their books physically. Some I will buy an ebook just to show support, but the stuff that I'm really, really into wanting to possess and read, I buy it in paperback or hardback, if depending on what it is. So,
well, there's something about a book in your hand, the smell of old paper, the whole tactile and sensory experience is elevated over holding a tablet or your phone.
Yeah. I like them at the beach, plainly.
Mm-hmm.
They're good. It's nice. Seems like the right place for them. So let us move into talking about your new release, Stormjammer, follow-up to Kiss for Damocles. It is all part of the Tales from the Long Night series.
Yes. Stormjammer is the direct sequel to Shai's first novel, A Kiss for Damocles. It's actually the fourth novel in the Tales for the Long Night to come out. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, the third novel. And like I said, it's Shai's. It's the direct sequel in Shai's narrative. Shai's story, her novels are the backbone, heart, and core of the universe of these stories. There's a parallel series, but you can read it independently. If you read both, you're much enriched. You get a richer feel for the universe and the overall story because it is ultimately one big story. But Shai-Fen Row is the heart and soul of it. The kids think Laura Ingalls in space with a sawed-off shotgun, extra grenades, raised by Jane Cobb with Earl Harbinger for her spirit animal. And a little bit of Joe Pesci in there, too.
That, all right. That makes the recipe interesting. Gave a curveball. So is all of this stuff out on Rack Press, or I'm guessing maybe some of the earlier short story material is a little more scattered?
pretty much everything is on Rack Press now. The two stories that the original Granville Gazette published have since been published as reprints in Rack Press anthologies. So that's it's everything I've written in the Tales of the Long Night is available through Rack Press now, either through the respective anthologies or the novels or a couple of novellas I've also released.
So you guys are linked. You're at the hip.
Oh, they caught me at they were buying my short stories, and you don't make as much money with an anthology as you do selling to a traditional magazine. But the traditional magazines are all gone now, or they've got contracts that are just untenable. Since I don't know if you've heard of the stink about the Asimov/Analog contracts. They were bought out, and there are issues with the language in the contracts.
Yeah, I'm not 100% familiar, but happy to hear about it.
Yeah, Jonna could tell you about it better than I could.
I will have to follow up.
But Rack Press, the contract is tidy and short and clean. The accounting is beautifully transparent. And they do what the anthologies are all done through PubShare. So I can look and see the number of books sold, what my share of each one is, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just great. And with the novels, I can call or message John at any time and say, hey, what's my numbers? And she'll get me my sales numbers, Kindle reads, et cetera, et cetera. I try not to be a pest about it, though.
It's cool to see indie publishers doing these different types of experiments and seeing how they go. And I think Raconteur Press, from the sound of it, having interviewed a number of authors in their stable at this point, it seems to be significantly more transparent and also significantly differently structured than a lot of the other relationships between authors and publishers. And I'm not in the place to sling mud or poke my finger in the eye of any other publishers. I don't know the ins and outs enough on that side of things. I'm an indie guy, but it seems like people appreciate what Raconteur Press is doing, and it seems like the experiment is working currently. So, yeah, hopefully they keep building on that momentum, and we see how far the opportunity can go.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot of potential because they are very methodical when they adapt something, or when they change something, or when they try something new. They do so in a very, very methodical and calculated manner. And they're not afraid to say, well, that didn't work. We're going to turn it to this side or that a little bit and try something else. And they've also been careful in how they have, they build part of their system. Well, they built their first system on the anthologies. And then they intentionally stressed with high volume their system. And there are people to see how much can we push out, and while still providing good quality. Where are the things that trip us up? Where do the problems happen? How do we fix those? And it's really been most new businesses, they fail because the owner tries to expand too big too fast, or they don't approach things with forethought. That's the opposite here. They're willing to try new things, but they carefully calculate every trajectory they possibly can. So I'm a lot more confident with them having my books than some of the other small indie presses or indie publishers, because I've watched them every step of the way as how careful they've been. And they're also very, very nicely professional. They don't play jack around with the writers, the artists, anybody. And that's nice. That's a really nice thing. A lot of places it's you've submitted your story, now shut up and get out of the way. Like typically the standard in publishing is unless you've got like a huge name. When it's time to design a cover, the author is taken to the basement and chained to a radiator while the cover art is designed. And with Raconteur Press, I've been able to go back and forth with the artists saying, oh, no, here, she looks more like this, or he looks more like that. Yeah, they do the research. They can tell me what is selling and what will work best for this book. But I've got input to make sure they're not showing a character in exactly the opposite way they're actually depicted in the stories.
Yeah.
And that's really nice. It shows both respect and integrity. So I try not to be too much of a pedantic pain in the butt.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Well, none of the artists have stabbed me in the eye yet, so I guess I'm not too bad.
You know, keep the streak alive.
Yeah.
As for today, are there any things that we haven't yet talked about, or that you feel inclined to say that you have not yet?
Oh boy, I'm drawing a blank on that one.
Got him.
Just if you like any of the stories in the Tales of a Long Night, you look up my Amazon page, and if you want more of the world or this or that particular character, you can usually track it down through my Amazon page because I've got characters that appear in multiple stories. A lot of the short stories are foundational prequel items that affect the current world. I also have a Substack page, Kenton Pierce at Substack. And if you go into my archive, you'll find like a timeline, a list of the various stories, which I need to update, and a lot of general discussions on my stories, on my inspirations, on things that just stuck with me. Every now and then I'll write irritable, grumpy comments about some movie that really could have been great, but then got fumbled, or something I just really loved. So if you like one story, there's a good chance you're going to like the other stuff in that series.
When does Stormjammer come out?
Kindle pre-order is open now, and I think the hard copy and actual purchase is on the 19th. So that'll actually be out before the Prometheus Award folks do their voting. And it'll be out for LibertyCon. I'll be at LibertyCon, and I am actually I'm on a panel on logistics alongside David Weber, of all people. So I feel like a toddler, a kindergartner with his crayon picture sitting next to, say the brothers Hildebrandt or, Clyde Caldwell or one of these other amazing artists that, I'm like, I draw a picture, and these guys have these masterpieces.
Hey.
So sitting on a panel with these guys is kind of awe-inspiring and terrifying.
Well, we all got to start somewhere, Yeah. Well, Kenton Pierce, I do appreciate you taking the time.
Delighted to have been here. I really appreciate the opportunity to ramble about my nerd stuff.
Absolutely. Well, this has gone well, and we will talk again before too long.
Okay, outstanding. Have a good one.